Welcome to the Buff Show. I have Sue and Camilla here with me. They are with Metro National Title, and they are they work with a title company that they're like the backbone to some of our transactions. They really help us out a ton. So thank you guys for being on today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So can you guys, Sue, can you tell us a little bit about you, and then Camilla, and just who you are, a little bit about your family and stuff, where you're from?
Yeah, sure. I'm an escrow officer with Metro National Title, and I've been in the industry for about 30 years now.
Wow.
I started out as a secretary receptionist, and then I was a title assistant, a escrow assistant, and then an escrow officer for about 28 years now of
Wow.
the 30, and always been with the same company the whole time. Love what I do. It's such a fun job. You meet so many nice people along the way, and it's fun to work with new home buyers that are excited about buying a home.
Yeah.
So I really love what I do. I'm from Pennsylvania originally, but I've been here in Utah for about 30 years.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I remember my first, I was shadowing another agent, and my first day out in the field, we went to a closing, and you were the closing officer.
Oh,
yeah,
really?
It was awesome. It went good. It got me excited. So,
Oh.
And Camilla?
Yeah, I'm Camilla. I have been with Sue for 16 years now, going on 17. I'm an escrow processor, but I'm also licensed, so I can do closings. I'm originally from Canada. I've been here since I was 10.
I didn't know you were from Canada.
Yes, I am Canadian.
That is awesome.
I have two little kids, Dash and Remy, and just,
Yeah,
do my thing.
Camilla and I were neighbors. We didn't know it for a while, and then
Yeah.
we found out we were neighbors. So that was really fun.
Yeah.
But these guys are awesome. Like any title work that we need done on transactions or weird wonky stuff, they get after it and make it happen. So, Sue, can you just break down what a title company is and why we need them?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So the title company really has two different functions. First, there's the title department, and then there's the escrow department. So the title department, they do a title search on the property that's being sold, purchased. They look in the public records, see what's been recorded, if there's any mortgages that need to be paid off, if there's judgments, liens that need to be cleared. They also make sure the legal description for the property that's being transferred is correct. Sometimes they do find issues that need to be cleared up, so that's why it's really important to have a title company do the title search. Just make sure everything is done properly.
Right.
And then anything that needs to be cleared is just disclosed in what we call a title insurance commitment, and that just shows everything that the title searcher found when they did the search. And then after the title insurance commitment goes out to everyone, just let everyone know, what needs to be cleared. Then the escrow team, Camilla and I, then we get payoff statements, pay off mortgages, do correction deeds if maybe title wasn't transferred in the past properly. And then we work on getting the transaction and close. We work with all parties.
Yeah.
We're kind of the middleman. We kind of coordinate with everyone, with the buyers, the sellers, real estate agents, lenders, other title companies. Sometimes there's two title companies involved.
Right.
And so we kind of coordinate all of that and make sure everything is handled properly and all of the final closing documents reflect what the contract intended. So that's kind of the role that the title company plays, the title and escrow.
It's kind of an industry that you're like it's all behind the scenes. You never think of oh, I'm going to buy a house, and you're not thinking about the mechanics lien that could be there, or it could be deeded wrong, or a million other things that could be wrong, and you don't want to inherit those issues when you buy it. So that's where title companies come in. They make sure that you're getting what they say you're getting, and that you're not inheriting a bunch of debt or the wrong property or something like
or
that.
a prior owner's interest.
Right.
That's the other thing too. We make sure that no prior owners are going to come out from the woodwork and claim an interest in your property. So we make sure that the buyers are protected that way.
So do you have to use a title company when buying or selling a home?
You don't have to, but I would say 99% of the time there's a title company involved. I've only seen a few rare occasions where maybe it's a family deal, you know, a father selling to a son, and they feel like they know the property well enough that they don't need title insurance. But also, I found when they do that and they don't get title insurance, sometimes and they prepare their own deed, there's issues. Sometimes they don't use the right legal description and it doesn't transfer properly anyway.
Right.
So the answer to the question is you don't have to by law get title insurance,
Yeah.
but everyone does. And so, you know, if a buyer's getting a loan, the lender's going to require title insurance. You have to.
Yeah.
And any buyer would want title insurance
Oh, for
anyway.
sure, yeah.
So
Yeah, and so typically in a transaction, like the state REPSI that we all use, like I've never done a deal where title insurance or title company wasn't involved. And in the state REPSI, in there it says that the seller will issue the buyer a title
Mm-hmm.
policy, basically ensuring the house that they know what they're getting, right?
right.
And so I guess if you don't use the state approved forms and stuff, like there's ways to get around it or not use it. But I've never not had a title policy issued. And then if you have a lender, don't they require another policy as well?
Right, exactly. There are two types of policies that we issue: an owner's policy, which ensures the buyer they have clear title to the property, and the seller customarily pays for that. And then the lender requires a lender's policy, which ensures the lender that's loaning money for the purchase that they have a valid loan against the property. And all lenders require it. That's never ever negotiable.
Right. So, Camilla, who normally like picks a title company? Buyer, seller?
Well, since the seller pays for the owner's policy, they can technically pick, and vice versa with the buyer. They're paying for the lender's policy, so they get to pick because it's their money. They get to choose where they go.
Yeah.
But they don't have those relationships with title companies most times. They rely on their real estate agent or loan officer to kind of, you know, guide them and, what's the word?
Just find the best relationship.
Yeah,
or-
find the best
yeah.
relationship, or because they're the ones doing multiple deals,
Mhm.
and they know, and they've worked with a couple, so they know who's
Yeah.
good and who's not. So, if you have a good agent, they usually work with a good title company,
Right.
and they can guide you towards the more professional, reliable, best customer service.
And I think that's like a lot of buyers don't realize that if it's a cash deal, typically the buyer just works with the seller's title company because they're just getting that owner's policy issued to them. But anybody that's getting a loan, if there's ever a loan or a lender involved, the buyer can technically choose what title company they want to work with. They don't have to work with the seller's title company.
It's customary, like a lot of split transactions
Yeah.
in Utah.
Right.
So.
And I almost prefer it split. Like if I'm representing a buyer, like because it's cool seeing two different title companies, like their commitments and stuff.
Right.
And then you have like double the coverage in a way, or double the eyeballs on the transaction, I guess.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of people don't think about that. If it's if they're a buyer, and a lot of times the seller's title company will reach out to them and say, "Hey, do you have a title company? If not, we can just do it for you. We have it all done anyways for the first time." But I think if you can like have another title company involved, it helps a lot. And like with Metro and Sue and Camilla, like we work a lot in Ogden Valley, and these guys know like all the water companies up there, like the HOA people and committees. So like they're able to like they just know that stuff like the back of their hand, and that makes such a big difference too. Same with like a lot of title companies don't deal with like water rights and wells and stuff like that. But you guys have been like lifesavers in that, because I would say 90% of the time, if you have a buyer buying a house with a well on it, the water rights or shares are never in the buyer's or the current seller's name. It's always like a few sellers back, it seems like. And so you have to do like the chain of title and get all that sorted. So there's so many parts of like the title process that you just don't think about.
Right.
But you guys
Well, and I
save
think
the
that
day.
sets me and Sue apart because we don't insure water rights, so we're not obligated or required to help facilitate that. But I think that's part of our customer service is we know so much about it up there that we are able to help the buyer and the seller prepare those documents and pull those title docs to get water, especially with the division of water rights into their name.
Yeah.
So
Well, and you guys have been great too, like closing. Like Sue and I have done a bunch of closings in like people's homes. Like there was one closing up in Logan. Do you remember we did it on like the bed of a truck, like the tailgate?
Yeah.
So like a lot of people think it's like very formal and you got to go in and sign, but no, it can really be done anywhere as long as it's planned accordingly and stuff. So thank you guys for that. It's been
Of course.
it's
Yeah.
been awesome.
I've done closings pretty much everywhere.
Yeah.
Maternity
hospitals,
wards.
Taco Bell, coffee shops.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
Wherever it works.
So what's the most common like type of title policy that we deal with in real estate?
So the owner's policy
Okay.
and the lender's policy. That's pretty much it, really.
Yeah.
I think we can issue a leasehold policy. We never see those. Those don't
Okay.
come up. But
That's mostly commercial.
Mhm.
Yeah.
yeah.
And aren't there
Yeah.
different types of like ALTA policies, like I guess additional add-ons or things that you can have?
Endorsements
Yeah.
and coverage. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we don't see much of the endorsements on a residential owner's policy. We see them in commercial transactions a lot, and lender policies. We issue some standard endorsements.
Gotcha.
But certainly we can issue any endorsement that a buyer feels they might want some extra coverage for.
Gotcha. Okay. So what does the process look like if a client calls you and they're like, hey, we got this house under contract, we're using a lender. Well, let's run it for both buyer and seller. We'll start out with buyer. If a buyer calls you and like, hey, we got this house under contract, and we're working with this lender and this agent. Like, can you walk us through that process with the buyer there?
Yeah, sure. Well, normally the buyer's first step is to get with a lender, find a lender to do the financing, and then I reach out. I send an email to all buyers and sellers that we're working with. So once it's under contract and we get the order, then I send an email out to each buyer and seller, just introducing ourselves. I know it's kind of a scary process. It's an unfamiliar process to a lot of people. So I just want to send out an introduction. So if they have questions, they know who to contact. And I also send out kind of an itemized list of how the transaction will go and what to expect.
Right.
So I send that out. And oftentimes I'll get replies from the buyers and sellers just asking questions. And we just start talking through the process so that it isn't so unfamiliar or stressful. I mean, it already is stressful. So I like to take a little bit of that stress away by telling them upfront what to expect.
Right. Yeah.
And then so from there, then we issue our title insurance commitment. We get any information we might need, and then we're ready to go as soon as the buyer's lender's ready with the loan documents. Then once the buyer's lender's ready to close, then we schedule a time, we meet, we sign documents. And then usually the next day is when we record it with the county, sometimes same day. Usually next day, we tell the buyers, how much money to wire in. We give them our wire instructions. They wire their funds. So once we get the buyer's money, the lender's money, and the okay from the lender to proceed, we get it all recorded with the county, and it's done. That's
So
it in a nutshell.
Yeah, there's a few like key problems we always run into with buyers and sellers sometimes, but like if you're buying the property in a trust or an LLC, like you need all those documents. Like you guys will physically need copies of those. Same with if you're just buying it in your own name, personal name, you need like a form of ID, sometimes two forms of ID.
Yeah, right.
I used to have buyers bring in checks like for their down payment. I don't see that very much anymore. But anything under 10 grand, you can bring in the form of a check.
Correct, right.
But anything over 10 grand's a wire.
Correct, yeah.
I think people don't realize that because some people are like, okay, I'm going to run and grab a check. It's like, no, the 100 grand needs to be a wire.
Yeah, exactly.
And then also like wire fraud is something to be aware of. So you guys are very good at like, hey, here's our wiring instructions, confirm, and you have a good process there. So there's no wire fraud happening.
Right. We send our wire instructions securely, and then in that secure email, we always recommend or suggest or request that they call in and verbally verify
Yeah.
the wire instructions. And some banks, when you get to the bank to send the wire, the banks will even call us to verbally verify.
Oh, that's cool.
So I think everyone is on the lookout for wire fraud, and we try so diligently to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Right.
And when they come in for closing, if they haven't wired yet, I hand them wire instructions, in person. That's
Yeah.
the safest. So.
Yeah. Another huge like misconception with buyers and sellers is they always think like, oh, our settlement date is today. We're going to go sign and get keys to the house right away. And like you indicated, that that's not the case. There's a big difference between settlement and like closing. Can you go over that a little bit?
Oh, yeah. And that's true. We often refer to when you come in to sign the documents as closing, but technically it's settlement.
Right.
And so when you come in to sign the documents, that's settlement, but then it's not actually closed until it's recorded with the county. And we
Yeah.
can't record until we have all of the money and the lender's approval
Right.
to actually record, and then it's closed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one big thing like that agents and buyers need to be aware of, and sellers, is in the REPC, you have, like, let's say your settlement date is the 15th. I think the REPC says you have 3 or 4 days after the 15th to fund and record.
Yeah, the lender does.
Yeah.
Everybody has to sign, like the seller has to sign, the buyer has to sign, and the buyer has to deposit all of their funds by the settlement deadline date. And then the lender has 4 calendar days to fund the loan
Right.
after everybody signs.
Yeah. Which is crazy. So like, there's been some, like, you just have to be so careful. Like whenever you have a contract in place, like you're agreeing to that deal. And so like I recently heard of a deal where there was some buyer and seller weren't getting along, and there was a large earnest money amount, like $100,000 or something like that. And during the transaction, the seller got another offer, backup offer. And the buyers were, I can't remember if they signed a day late or they wired their funds a day late, but they breached contract. And the seller took that as an out, and they're like, okay, we're out. We're going to go with this other offer. You guys breach contract. We get your earnest money. And they went with that higher offer. So the buyers lost their earnest money, and the seller was able to sell the house for more. So it's just like a good reminder at how you need to pay attention to the contract and like what you're agreeing to, and then making sure you have a good team to like keep you on track, and knowing what like the difference between settlement is. And like, hey, if you're going to settle on this day, you need to come in and sign. We need to have your funds, and the lender can do it up to 4 days or 3 or 4 days after. And then also that can be a pain with like movers and stuff. So it's like you always want to be clear with the other party, like, hey, when's possession going to happen? When's recording going to happen? So we've definitely run into that before with some issues there. And so if a seller decides to work with you guys, I know for us, if we get a listing, like the first thing we do is like, hey, let's get a title commitment ordered. So we can see, we get the plat, like just all the documents recorded against that property, we get it, and we get to know more about it. If there's an HOA, like their restrictions and just everything like that. So that's the first thing that we do, because if we have a buyer that comes along, I hate waiting for like, okay, we have a buyer, now let's order that. Like, that's not how I like to do it. But so what's the process working with a seller and a title policy there?
Well, first of all, I'm so glad you order a listing title report
Yeah.
right from the get-go, because a lot of agents don't. A lot do, but not everyone does. And I think one of the really good reasons to do that is if there's a title problem that needs to be worked out, and we might need some time to figure it out, we can get that all fixed before it even goes under contract in some cases. And also to make sure that the contract's signed by the entity or person that actually really owns the property. Because we've had that come up before where, people think that they own it, or I shouldn't say that. They don't have everyone sign the contract that's in title, I guess. So,
because I've had trusts where we had like 7 or 8 signers, and you're like, geez. But had you not had the title report and like looked at the trust, like you wouldn't know who the signers were.
Exactly. Yeah. Or if it's a company, we get company docs and make sure we have the right signers. So,
So what's a title like we connect you with the sellers, like what kind of happens next?
Again, just like when we're handling the buyer side, I send an introduction email explaining what the seller's process will look like. And then we reach out, well, mainly Camilla will be reaching out to the sellers to get loan numbers for payoffs that we have to order, and getting social security numbers. We'll need those.
Company documents, trust documents.
All of that, yeah. And then Camilla is the one who really orders the payoff statements and does the title clearing. And then after that, we just wait for the lender to be ready with the loan docs, and then we schedule the seller to come in and sign and do their part. And then we disperse all of the funds to the seller and pay off their underlying mortgage and pay any of the expenses the seller needs to pay after it's recorded, right after it's recorded. So we collect all the funds, and then we record documents with the county, and then we disperse the money. So that's kind of why we're involved. We're just kind of the third-party, neutral, unbiased company that makes sure that we don't give money to the seller before we record the deed and make sure title's clear. And that's kind of the seller side, I guess.
Awesome. One other thing that I think is common, like there's a lot of real estate companies that are like, they prefer that the title company holds the buyer's earnest money. And I'm not a big fan of that, but what are the implications of you guys holding like a buyer's earnest money during the contract process? Like if the contract goes south, like how does that money get released? What does that process look like?
Well, and we have different regulations than real estate companies have. I think real estate companies can just release it to whoever they deem it should go to, but we have to have written instructions from both buyer and seller as to who to disperse it to. So that could delay getting that earnest money back to whoever.
And if both parties don't agree, like, then what happens?
Then it becomes a legal matter.
And the money's just held, and you get attorneys involved.
Exactly. Yeah.
Gotcha. So, like at our brokerage, we're like, hey, like the earnest money's held at the brokerage account because we have way more flexibility to like disperse of it according to the REPC versus like you guys, if like the buyer backs out during due diligence and they're like fully entitled to the earnest money per the contract, if the seller's like mad or upset, like they could be like, no, we're not going to sign the paper, and then kind of SOL.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, we can't represent either side. We're going to have to stay in the middle, so we don't want to take a biased opinion and take one agent saying, yeah, it's my buyer, where we're not supposed to what's the word?
Interpret. Like,
interpret the contract.
Right.
We're just supposed to do what we're supposed to do based on instructions. So
right.
we have to get mutually agreed instructions.
Yeah, so that's why we always like the earnest money just held at the brokerage account, because we can,
prefer it too.
Yeah, I bet.
It's easier for us.
I bet. So what are some of the fees associated with like a title policy? Like what does that look like? I know buyers are always like, hey, how much should I plan on in like closing costs? Because it is wrapped into like your closing costs. I always tell them like simple rule, like it's about 1% of the purchase price, and that like that's all of your closing costs. And that's typically on the high side. But do you have like a rule of thumb that, because that's wrapping in like lender fees and appraisals and stuff like that.
Right,
but is there a percentage or a number or something that you guys could tell us? Like if you're buying a $500,000 house, your title policy would roughly be this much, and like down the line.
Well, we have our underwriters have rate charts where that dictates what we charge.
Gotcha.
And so the higher the sales price, the higher the premium. But I don't think it's a certain percentage.
Gotcha.
So usually, if someone just asks for ballpark figures, I'll just ask them, well, what's your estimated sales price
Right.
or loan amount? Because the sales price is what determines how much we charge on the owner's policy. The lender's policy then is based on the loan amount. The
That makes
premiums
sense.
based on
I've
that.
never thought of it that way.
And our standard closing fee is $425. So it's just that's it.
Right.
That's for our closing fee. But then to quote title insurance, I usually just look at a rate chart and get an estimate of what they might be borrowing or
Right.
sales price.
It's a number I've never like been able to dial into. So if you have a question, just get an estimate and they can give it to you really quick. If you want everything wrapped in together, like I always find that 1% rule seems to work out
Yeah.
pretty okay.
That sounds like a good amount.
Yeah.
Right?
What are a few things you wish people understood more about the process? Are there things that people commonly do? Like, do people come in trying to pay their mortgages to you guys? Like, are there things that you're like, hey, I wish more people understood?
I can't think of anything really.
Can't you?
No.
No.
Can you talk about escrow? Because I think like setting that up, and because I've had some clients like, so who do I pay the payment to? The title company? And I'm like, no. You'll get a letter in the mail and stuff, but maybe go like expound a little bit more on like what like an escrow account is and stuff like that.
The escrow account for
Taxes
like
and
yeah,
insurance.
taxes and insurance and all that.
okay. So if there's traditional financing, if there's
Yeah.
a lender involved,
Yeah.
then they add into your monthly payment 1/12 of the estimated annual county property taxes, and then 1/12 of the annual premium for the homeowners or hazard insurance. That's all added into the payment, and then as you make your monthly payment, a portion of the payment goes into that escrow reserve account. So that just keeps building until taxes are due or insurance is due, and then the loan servicer pays the taxes and insurance for you. And most loans have the escrow reserve account included, but it is optional if you get conventional loan where you have at least 20% equity or 80% loan to value. Then it's optional.
You can opt
usually,
out of that.
Usually.
Can they wrap homeowners insurance into that? Or not homeowners insurance, but HOA dues and stuff like that?
I've never seen that included in the payment.
Gotcha.
Usually you just have to pay that on your own.
So it's just your homeowners
probably
insurance.
More work for the lender because then they have to contact the HOA and
Yeah.
get if the dues go up.
Right.
So it's just one less thing that they have to worry about.
And
getting.
usually it's a monthly fee. So
Yeah.
probably loan servicers don't want to have to
That's
keep paying
true.
something
Yeah.
monthly.
No, that definitely is
guess.
more of a lender sided question because they're more involved in setting all that up. How about like 1031 exchanges? Can you guys help facilitate in that?
Yeah, we have our own in-house exchange company, Metro National Exchange Services, and then they handle all the paperwork. It's a really simple process on the seller's end if they're the ones doing the exchange or if the buyer's doing an exchange. Either way, it's really quite simple. We take care of getting the paperwork from the exchange company, and then when you come in to close, we just have everything all signed at that time. And then we take care of, if you're selling, then we take care of sending the funds to the exchange company. And if you're buying, then we get the funds from the exchange company.
Gotcha.
So it's easy on the exchanger's part.
Gotcha.
To handle that for them.
It's just like so key because there's a lot of people so 1031s are where you're selling an investment property. So it could be land, like a rental house, apartment complex, anything that's like investment. Can't be a primary home. A lot of people get that mixed up where they're like, I'm going to 1031 my primary home. And you're like, sorry, you can't. But if you're going to be involved in a 1031 exchange, there's like a bunch of rules you have to follow. And we could do a whole like episode on that. But the biggest thing is before you sell the property, you can't touch the funds. Like you can't sell the property, have the funds wired to your account, and then be like, I'm going to do a 1031 exchange. You have to find a title company and an intermediary where the funds go to, and then they sit there for X amount of days, and then you have a certain amount of days to identify and purchase another property, and then those funds are then wired to that property. So it's a very, I wouldn't say super complicated process, but you just have to know the rules and follow them and have the right people on your team to get you through that. So if you're doing a 1031 exchange, these guys are great and can help you out with that. Are there any like tools or resources, websites, books, or anything that you recommend if buyers are wanting more info or sellers on like the title process and stuff like that? I'm sure you guys have stuff on your website.
We do, yeah. We have some tutorial videos. American Land Title Association, the BALTA.org, they have a ton of really helpful information. That'd be a good resource.
Awesome.
And we have an app. It's Title One.
Metro Title One. Yeah, it's
Metro Title One.
Yep.
Yeah, I think you
that's
just
a
came
great
out
app.
with it, right?
Yes, and that actually going back to what buyers can expect, there's actually a lot of calculators on there. if they can plug in their sales price and their loan amount, it will give them like an estimated amount of our closing costs because they're tied into what we've already programmed in there,
Yeah.
like our fees and our tier for lenders' policies and owners'
Right.
policies. A lot of rent-to-own calculators. Is it worth it to rent to buy?
Oh, that's cool.
There's a bunch of seller net sheets on there. Agents can go on there and do it if they got multiple offers.
Yeah.
So,
And those seller net sheets, we get those a lot. Like, hey, what are you expecting out the door after everything's all said and done? Like, those are super helpful. So,
and we're welcome to do those besides the app too. Like
Right.
if you call in or your buyer and seller call in and I just want a rough estimate and I can usually work up a net sheet based on a buyer or seller.
yeah, awesome. Okay, well, this has been very helpful, guys. Thank you. And where can people find out more about you? I'm guessing online on your website.
Yeah.
Just Google.
Yeah, metrotitle.com.
Yeah. Yeah, if you Google Sue or Camilla, and with Metro, like their address and numbers will pull up. So they're a great resource in the real estate process. So thank you guys for coming on.
Thank
and
you.
I appreciate it.
Yep.
Good job, guys.